everyone, and welcome to another episode of Chef Talk. I'm your host, Brianna Williams, and on today's episode of Chef Talk, we'll be discussing food insecurity in our communities and how you can join the fight against it. Our special guest joining us today is Zuani Villario, who is the Director of Communications for Feeding America. Hi, Zuani, how are you doing today?
Hi, Brianna. Nice to see you. Thank you.
Great, and thank you for being on today. We're so appreciative of the work that you do for Feeding America, and I know that you'll be able to provide a lot more insight into the issue of food insecurity, as well as providing more information onto what Feeding America does for communities around the nation. And so just to give our viewers there a little bit more background on Feeding America itself, Feeding America is a US-based nonprofit organization that is a nationwide network for hundreds of food banks that feed millions of people across the country through a variety of different ways. So that could be food banks, food pantries, soup kitchens, shelters, and other community-based organizations. And so, Zuani, we definitely would love to hear more information on Feeding America as we go throughout the show. So let's go ahead and jump right into our discussion for today. Just to start off here, we want to talk a little bit about what exactly is food insecurity. And so, Zuani, could you let all of us know what exactly is food insecurity and what is the difference between that and just in hunger?
Certainly. Food insecurity is certainly a term that I think we've heard a lot more in the last year and a half because of the pandemic. And hunger is something that we all know and recognize. We can all experience hunger at some point, right? If we've skipped breakfast and are having a late lunch, we know what hunger is. It's that physical experience that each of us can have. But food insecurity is the lack of access to enough food, adequate nutritious food because of limited financial resources. So because you're food insecure, you could be facing hunger. Because you don't know where your next meal is going to come from. And so that's the difference.
Okay, great. That's a great definition for us. Because a lot of times I don't think people really understand that it's a bit nuanced there, the difference between food insecurity and hunger. And so moving on, how common is food insecurity exactly? Is it possible to identify someone who struggles from food insecurity?
Well, I think the thing that is most surprising to people as they're learning about food insecurity is that it exists in every community, parish, county, and borough in the United States. Feeding America is a nationwide network of 200 food banks. We serve all 50 states, Washington, D.C., and Puerto Rico. And through our research, we know that food insecurity exists everywhere. There is not one community that is free from food insecurity. And these are our neighbors, they're our classmates, they're our coworkers, they're our friends. We go to church with them, we see them in the park. They could be anybody. And I think that's the thing that is most surprising as people learn about the issue of food insecurity is that it exists everywhere and it can happen to anybody.
And that's a really great point that you brought up, especially being that we're a campus dining company. We are on college campuses. I think a lot of times we don't realize how much of an issue it can be even on college campuses. And so one thing we might touch on later, available resources that are available on your college campuses. But again, just the idea that it really is way more common than we think and affect the people that we might be closest to. And so it's something that we definitely need to have a conversation on. So is it possible to identify a cause for food insecurity? How does one become food insecure?
Well, yeah, as I mentioned, food insecurity can happen to anybody. And there is a study, USDA does a survey every year to identify and do the official food security count in the United States. It's a survey of more than a dozen questions asking about budgets, household budgets, and the ability to provide food. But food insecurity is an intersectionality issue. It connects with so many different issues like the economy, like poverty and unemployment. So looking at all those different factors helps us identify food insecurity in every community. We know that food insecurity can happen to anybody because Americans, a lot of Americans live paycheck to paycheck. So they don't necessarily have that financial security that they think they might have. The pandemic showed that to all of us. so many people became unemployed or lost their jobs, lost wages in an instant because of the pandemic, and ended up turning to food banks for help. We know that last year, about 60 million people turned to a food bank, a charitable food organization, a church pantry, or other private nonprofit for food assistance. 60 million people, that's 1 in 5. But food insecurity can also happen if you're going through another type of crisis. It could happen because of a natural disaster, like a hurricane that just hit Louisiana, wildfires in the West Coast. Many families have lost their homes, lost everything that they had. But it could also be a medical crisis. It could also be an accident, something that is unplanned that really throws a household budget into disarray that can cause a family to turn to a food bank or a food pantry for help.
Yeah, and you hit on a lot of great points there. One thing, like you said, with the recent pandemic, I've definitely noticed myself an uptick in the different food banks that are available in our own area. And so I definitely want people to be aware of those resources that are available. And so with that, and we talk about college campuses specifically, what does Feeding America, what services do you offer for students on college campuses, especially? I think that that's something that I really want to touch on, being that most of our viewers are college students out there. And so, yeah, what does Feeding America do to combat the issue on campus?
Well, I'll start with my answer high level. And for anybody that's watching this, no matter if they're on campus or not, if they're a student or not, they can find their local food bank by going to feedingamerica.org. There's a food bank locator right on the front page, and you just type in your zip code and you're connected to your food bank. So anybody that needs assistance can find it right there with that website. Now, on college campuses, we know that a majority of students are non-traditional students. So they have a lot of responsibilities. They maybe did not receive a traditional high school diploma. They may have dependents that they're taking care of. They may be in school part-time. They may also have jobs on the side as well. So they are not 100% focused on school. Because of that, we know that they are balancing a lot and they have a lot of responsibilities, and sometimes financial security, food or income may be hurt because of all of that, right? You're trying to go to school, so maybe you can't work as much as you need to. So food security definitely is an issue among college campuses. What Feeding America is doing about that is we are partnering with college campuses to provide resources. So many college campuses may have a food pantry on site. Maybe it's in their student community center, or they will partner with a food bank to bring a mobile pantry or a mobile distribution on campus, maybe once a month, twice a month, whatever the frequency is. Also, food banks partner with college campuses to provide outreach resources to help students connect to programs like the SNAP program, like food stamps. They may not know that they qualify, but food banks have staff that are available to help them fill out the application and walk them through the process so that they're getting all the resources available to them, so that they're not worrying about where they're going to get the next meal, and they can worry about that paper that is due that they need to do and finish.
That's great. And one thing that you touched on were the food pantries that are on campus. To a lot of our students, the schools that we service, a lot of the schools do indeed have food banks food pantries on campus. So if you would like to find more information on that, again, like Zulani said, you can head over to Feeding America's website or your campus's dining website to figure out more information on what resources are available that way. And just moving on to the fact that most of the schools that we serve are predominantly HBCUs, so we serve people of color. And so with that, are minorities more susceptible to experiencing food insecurity? And what, if any, systematic challenges may we face that impact our ability to have access to food?
Certainly they are. Feeding America has known about the disproportionate impact that communities of color face with food insecurity. And this is something that was true before the pandemic, and it is more true now. Our research, or USDA's research, says that there's about 38 million people in the US that are facing hunger, including nearly 12 million children. And this is for 2020. But if we dive deeper into USDA's report, we can see that racial gaps between hunger are widening. So food insecurity for the Black individuals increased by about 25%. For Latinos, food insecurity increased by about 22%. But food insecurity for white individuals decreased by 6%. So even though food insecurity as a whole did not increase too much from the 2019 to last year during the pandemic, we know that there's widening disparities there. And so communities of color are bearing the brunt of that. Food insecure populations among communities of color are increasing. These problems that have been occurring for many years, there are systemic barriers, there are rules and systems in place that have kept communities of color from becoming successful. And Feeding America is working to address that. So we've established a food security equity impact fund. We want to contribute and work with communities of color, with leaders in those communities that are making that impact, and work with them to really address those root causes. We're committed to it. We know the food banks are committed to it. It's certainly something that we need to address. And I think right now, more than ever, we have an opportunity to do that.
Definitely agree. And one thing also I wanted to mention, I think this would be a good discussion for later on, is just food deserts. And so with communities of colors, a lot of people do live in more urban areas where they live in food deserts, where having access to whether it's grocery stores, gardens, or things of that nature might be a little more difficult to access. So that's definitely a discussion we can have later on. But in terms of looking across the country, or looking at the United States compared to other countries, how does the US measure up in the fight against food insecurity? And what are some systems that could be implemented to rectify the issue?
Well, we're certainly in a better position than other countries. And I think the response that we saw from the pandemic, because of the pandemic last year, really is giving us a roadmap. We thought that initially food insecurity was going to be much higher than the report actually turned out to be. And that's because initially there was millions and millions of people that lost their jobs. We saw the lines at food banks on the media. There's so many people that were turning to food banks for help. As I mentioned, 60 million last year turned to food banks for help. But USDA said that only about 38 million actually reported themselves as food insecure. And that's up only 3 million from the year prior. And that's because we believe that the robust response from public and private partnerships, so the federal response, the stimulus checks and the programs and flexibilities that the federal government provided for nutrition programs certainly helped. And then at the same time, food banks stepped up and provide a record 6 billion meals, up about 44% more than the previous year. So between those two public and private partnerships, that those different organizations, the charitable food sector and the federal government, we helped mitigate what we thought could have been a very catastrophic year for food insecurity. We know that there's enough food in the United States to help end hunger. It's just a matter of working together to get the food from those that have it to those that need it. That could be through additional outreach for federal nutrition programs like SNAP, getting more people enrolled in that program, increasing the benefits allowed through that program, or it could be through food bank expansion and deepening programs to reach more people that are disproportionately impacted, helping really go into those communities that really need the help.
That's great. And that's actually what I'm going to go into next. Now that we talk about and define exactly what food insecurity means, I kind of want to touch on how can not only students, but how can anyone in our communities get involved in fighting against food insecurity, whether that's through volunteering or donations? How can they get involved to combat the issue?
Well, like you mentioned, and you're exactly right, there are so many different ways to get involved in the fight to end hunger. Everybody can get involved in one way or another. Everybody has a role to play. If we really want to create an America where no one is hungry, we can all do our part. And that could be by volunteering. So that same website, feedingamerica.org, and you can find your local food bank, sign up to volunteer. Food banks depend on volunteers day in and day out to help do all the work of sorting donated product, putting together food boxes, and helping to distribute that food. You can raise your voice if you want, and if you're so comfortable with, you can share social media posts about Feeding America and about your local food bank on your social media channels. you can advocate as well and reach out to elected officials to help them support food banks and expand federal nutrition programs. And then finally, if you have the means and the resources and you want to donate a little bit of your dollars, you can certainly make a donation as well. All of that information can be found on our website, feedingamerica.org. And the great thing is that you can support at the national level through Feeding America, or if you want to support at the local level at your food bank or even at your local community pantry, you can do that as well. Like I said, we all have a role to play, and we can all do our part to help create an America where no one is hungry.
That's great. And one thing I wanted to touch on as well as we wrap up here is for the month of October, Thompson Hospitality is hosting our own food insecurity challenge. And so we're calling it the Good Fight. So that's going to be a food insecurity challenge where students can sign up to join in on the fight. So they can either volunteer, donate, or spread awareness via their social media channels, like you mentioned as well. And so definitely check out more information on that. You can go to your campus dining website to figure out how to join. And so, yeah, as well as that, we're going to be doing a canned good drive during National Food Bank Week during the month of October. So also definitely go to our campus dining websites to find out more information on that. And so, Zuani, with that, I just wanted to go ahead and wrap up the conversation. You definitely touched on some great points and given a lot of resources. So is there anything else that being a representative of Feeding America that you would want students or anyone out there watching to know about food insecurity or just joining the fight against hunger in America?
I think one of the things that I'd like to say is that hunger in America is a solvable problem. As I mentioned, there's enough food grown here to tackle the issue. I think we can all have a little empathy for our friends and our neighbors that may be going through hard times. And I think we're all feeling like we can make a difference by getting involved with your local food bank or with Feeding America. It is a solvable issue, and I think that together we can tackle hunger.
That's great. So Zuani, I want to thank you for taking time out of your day to join us and have this discussion. For all of our viewers out there, we hope that you were able to gain something from this discussion and learn more about the different resources that are available if you or someone you know might be struggling with food insecurity. And so to all of our viewers out there, again, this has been another episode of Chef Talk. If you like this episode and want to see more, be sure to subscribe to our THTV YouTube channel and follow along for more episodes of Chef Talk coming to you soon. And so, yeah, I just want to thank all of you out there for watching. Thank you, Zuani. This has been another episode of Chef Talk.